Each exchange shapes the final verdict. Every camera uncovers reality. Grasping your legal protections, enforcing true justice.
Let's ride. Folks around here don't see a car like this every day. What exactly are you doing in this neighborhood tonight?
I live here, 2 houses down on the left, just got home from work.
You live here in a suit after 9 o'clock driving a 70-grand Mercedes? You sure about that?
Sure, it's my car, registered in my name, insurance is in the glove
I'm not
box.
Officer Dale Hutchins had a reputation at the precinct, and not a good one. That night, he spotted a black man driving a clean Mercedes through a predominantly white neighborhood and made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He pulled him over, got in his face, and told him he was one wrong move away from going home in cuffs. What Officer Hutchins didn't know was that the man gripping that steering wheel was an FBI special agent with 14 years of federal service, and every single second of that stop was being recorded. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. It was a little past 9 p.m. on a Tuesday when Marcus Webb decided to take the long way home. He had just wrapped up a 14-hour day at the FBI field office in Atlanta, Georgia, and the quiet drive through the suburban streets of Crestwood Hills was the only break he was going to get. Marcus was 41 years old, calm by nature and sharp by training. He had spent nearly a decade and a half working federal investigations, organized crime, public corruption, and civil rights violations. He knew how to read a room, how to stay composed under pressure, and more importantly, he knew the law better than most people who swore an oath to uphold it. That night, he was not working. He was just a man in a dark suit, loosening his tie, driving his black Mercedes E-Class through a neighborhood he had every right to be in. He had his jazz playing low. His badge and credentials were in the inner pocket of his jacket, right where they always were. He was 2 miles from his front door when the blue and red lights filled his rearview mirror. Marcus didn't panic. He signaled, pulled over smoothly, and put both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen clearly. He had done this before, not because he was a criminal, but because he was a black man in America, and he understood what that meant the moment those lights came on. The officer who stepped out of that cruiser was Dale Hutchins, a 12-year veteran of the Crestwood Hills Police Department. At 44 years old, Hutchins was the kind of cop that other officers either avoided or quietly covered for. He had 2 formal complaints filed against him in the last 3 years, both involving black male drivers, both involving allegations of aggressive and unnecessary stops. Neither complaint had gone anywhere. His supervisors called him old school. The people he pulled over called him something else entirely. That night, Hutchins had been patrolling the Ridgeway Corridor, a stretch of Crestwood Hills that sat between a lower-income area and one of the wealthiest zip codes in the county. He later claimed he pulled Marcus over because the vehicle's tags came back with a delay in the system. Body cam footage would tell a very different story. Hutchins approached the driver's side slowly, one hand resting near his holster. He didn't greet Marcus. He didn't explain the stop. He shone his flashlight directly into Marcus's face and said, "License, registration, and insurance." Now, Marcus kept his voice level. "Good evening, officer. Can I ask what the reason for the stop is?" Hutchins didn't answer the question. Instead, he stepped closer to the window. "I'm the one asking questions here. Are you going to give me your documents, or are we going to have a problem?" Marcus reached slowly into his glove compartment, narrating every movement the way he was trained to do in the field. Not because policy required it in this situation, but because he knew how fast things could go wrong. He handed over his driver's license and vehicle registration. Hutchins took them without a word and stood there, studying them longer than necessary, his flashlight sweeping the interior of the car like he was looking for something. Anything to justify why he had stopped this man in the first place. "You live around here?" Hutchins asked, his tone making it clear he already doubted the answer. "I do," Marcus said. Hutchins looked at the license, looked at Marcus, then looked back at the license. "This address doesn't match the area you came from." Marcus stayed calm. "I took a different route home." There was a pause, the kind that wasn't really a pause. It was a decision being made, and whatever Hutchins decided in that moment, it was about to cost him everything. Hutchins didn't walk back to his cruiser to run the license like any routine stop would require. He stayed right where he was, leaning against the door of Marcus's car like he owned it. That alone told Marcus everything he needed to know about where this was heading. This was not a traffic stop anymore. This was something else, and Hutchins was just getting started. "Step out of the vehicle," Hutchins said. His voice had shifted. It was flatter now, harder, carrying the kind of authority that wasn't really about the law. It was about control. Marcus didn't move immediately, not out of defiance, but because he was thinking clearly while everything around him was becoming unreasonable. "Officer, I haven't been told why I was pulled over. I haven't been charged with anything. Can you give me a lawful reason to exit the vehicle?" That question lit something up in Hutchins. He pulled the door handle. "I'm not going to ask you again. Get out." Marcus stepped out slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate. He stood at 6 feet tall in a pressed dark suit, tie slightly loosened from the long day. He looked nothing like what Hutchins seemed to have decided he was. But Hutchins wasn't looking at who Marcus actually was. He had already made up his mind before he ever turned those lights on. "Put your hands on the roof," Hutchins ordered. "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked calmly. "Hands on the roof." Marcus complied. And as he stood there, palms flat against the cold metal of his own car, on a quiet street 2 miles from his own home, something was happening that Hutchins had no awareness of. The dash cam on Marcus's personal vehicle, a habit he had developed years ago after working enough cases to know better, was recording every second. The audio was clean. The angle was wide. Nothing was being missed. Hutchins began talking into his radio, calling for a second unit. He cited suspicious behavior and failure to comply. Neither description matched anything that had actually happened. Marcus had answered every question. He had moved slowly and carefully. He had kept his tone respectful, even as his rights were being stripped away on the side of the road like they meant nothing. The backup arrived within 4 minutes. Officer Pete Garrow pulled up behind Hutchins' cruiser and stepped out. Garrow was younger, only 3 years on the force, and the moment he saw Marcus standing calmly with his hands on the roof in a suit, something in his expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty that he quickly buried under the weight of seniority. Hutchins was the senior officer. Garrow was there to support, not to question. Hutchins turned back to Marcus. "You got anything in this car I should know about? Weapons, drugs, anything like that?" "No," Marcus said. "You mind if I search the vehicle?" Marcus turned his head slightly. "I do mind. I do not consent to a search." Hutchins smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "That's fine. I can call a K9 unit out here, and we can all wait together. Could be a while." He said it the way people say things when they want you to know they enjoy having power over you. Marcus said nothing. He understood exactly what was happening. This was a pressure tactic. Make the stop uncomfortable enough, drag it out long enough, and most people will either break down or say something that gives the officer what he's looking for. Hutchins had used this playbook before. He knew how it usually ended. What he didn't know was that Marcus had spent years sitting across from people who used psychological pressure as a weapon. He had interviewed federal suspects, organized crime figures, and corrupt officials who were far more skilled at intimidation than Dale Hutchins would ever be. A threat about a K-9 unit on a Tuesday night wasn't going to rattle him. But then Hutchins went further. He stepped close, too close, and lowered his voice so that Garrow couldn't hear clearly. "I don't know what you think this is," he said, "but in this neighborhood, at this time of night, driving a car like this, that's enough for me. You're one wrong move away from going home in cuffs. Or not going home at all." The last 4 words hung in the night air like a threat that had crossed every line that existed. Marcus looked at him steadily and said nothing. But inside, the decision had already been made. He reached slowly toward his jacket. Hutchins's hand moved to his holster. "Hey, what are you reaching for?" "My credentials," Marcus said quietly. "I think it's time you saw them." Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his jacket slowly. 2 fingers, the way you move when you want everyone around you to stay calm. He pulled out a flat black leather case and held it open directly in front of Dale Hutchins' face. The gold badge caught the light from the cruiser behind them. Below it, a federal identification card with Marcus's photo, his name, and 3 words that seemed to take a moment to reach Hutchins' brain. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hutchins didn't speak. His hand was still near his holster, but it wasn't moving anymore. His eyes went from the badge to Marcus's face, then back to the badge, like he was waiting for it to change into something that made more sense to him. It didn't change. Behind them, Officer Garrow had taken a few steps closer. He saw the credentials from where he stood and stopped walking. He didn't say a word either. The whole scene just went quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the moment after something breaks. Marcus closed the case slowly and slid it back into his pocket. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Hutchins with the same steady expression he had carried through the entire stop. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. "I've been a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 14 years, Marcus said. "Every word spoken tonight has been recorded. My dashcam has been running since before you approached my window. I asked you twice for the reason for this stop. You never gave me one. I was ordered out of my vehicle without cause. I was threatened. And I want to make sure you understand that I am referencing your exact words when I say that." Hutchins opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You don't need to say anything right now," Marcus said. "But I need you to understand that this stop is not over. It's just moving somewhere else." He got back into his Mercedes, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without another word. In his mirror, he could see Hutchins still standing exactly where he had left him, badge on his chest, hand at his side, watching the taillights disappear. Some mistakes you know the moment you make them. This was one of those. Marcus Webb did not go home that night and let it go. He sat at his kitchen table, jacket still on, and wrote a detailed incident report. Before he even loosened his tie the rest of the way, every time, every word, every threat. He had been trained to document, and that night he documented everything with the same precision he brought to federal investigations worth millions of dollars. Within 48 hours, the Crestwood Hills Police Department received a formal complaint from the FBI field office in Atlanta. It didn't come through a personal filing. It came through official channels, the kind of channels that make police chiefs sit up straight and call their lawyers before they call anyone else. The dashcam footage was pulled. The body cam footage was reviewed. What the recordings showed lined up exactly with what Marcus had reported, and directly contradicted the account Hutchins had submitted in his own paperwork that same night. Hutchins had written that Marcus was uncooperative and displaying erratic behavior. The footage showed a man in a suit, hands visible, voice calm, asking reasonable questions while being treated like a suspect without a single piece of evidence to justify it. Dale Hutchins was placed on administrative leave within the week. The 2 previous complaints against him, complaints that had been quietly buried, were pulled back out and added to the growing file. Officer Garrow cooperated fully with investigators. He was a young man who had made the mistake of staying silent in the moment, and he knew it. The city of Crestwood Hills was served with a federal civil rights lawsuit shortly after. The figure attached to it was $7.2 million. The lawsuit cited racial profiling, unlawful detention, excessive use of authority, and civil rights violations under federal law. Dale Hutchins lost his badge before the case ever reached a courtroom. But here's what stays with you, long after the legal details fade. Marcus Webb had a federal badge in his pocket that night, and it still almost wasn't enough. Most black men driving home on a Tuesday don't have that badge. They have the same rights, the same dignity, and the same humanity. And far too often, none of it is treated like it matters. That is the part of this story that doesn't end with a lawsuit.
True justice is an evolving process, and awareness remains your strongest shield. We appreciate your viewership and dedication to clarity.